Aloha, everyone.
Hello,
Welcome.
welcome.
We are simultaneously casting on several platforms. So let's see. I see it went live on your channel. Oh, now I see it's going live on my channel too. Cool. Oh, and I just got notification from Facebook. So I think we are live now, finally. Oh, yes, I see Beth on my channel. Aloha, Asphasia Rising.
Hi, Beth.
Let's see. Oh, I just got a message from Emily saying that, let's see, hang on, absolute nonsense happening on my laptop. Okay. Emily will be with us shortly.
Excellent. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We're here today to talk about this magnificent deck. Jonathan and I want to say, I don't know if we could call ourselves groupies of Emily Carding, but we've been taking workshops with her. And those of you that have been following me, I've been a fan of Tarot of the She, I don't know, long time. Really love using this deck, and more recently have acquired the Transparent Tarot as well as the Transparent Oracle, and really enjoyed connecting with Emily personally. Learned so much more about her decks, just being with the creator.
Those workshops are definitely worth every penny. I just feel like my own understanding of each of the decks has deepened so profoundly just from hearing where Emily created things from.
Yeah, and the About Emily to appear. Welcome to the Donnas. Hello, and Gerald, welcome to you.
I will be, just one moment. I have Emily texting, so.
Hi, Dee. So what we're gonna do today is once Emily gets here, we'll get her to talk a little bit about the deck. But the deck that we are sharing with you today is a circular, transparent oracle, and there are so many beautiful features of this deck. And there's a few things that I would love to ask Emily, things that I didn't get to ask in the workshop, which I will do in a little bit. But if you have any inclination towards shamanic decks, you work with nature-based decks, this is an oracle that is connected to 7 directions. So you could look at the organization of the deck in terms of 7 suits. And beginning in the east with the rising sun, the east, the south, the west. West, of course, would be the setting sun, the north, the direction of above, so connecting to the star people, the sky, the planets, the energy, the celestial energy, as well as the energy of the earth. And one of the things that was new to me in Emily's interpretation of the direction of below was the connection to ancestry. So in my shamanic studies, I've connected the energy of below to Pachamama, and we call in all of the creepy crawlies and the fish and the four-leggeds and the furry friends, and the earth and the plants and all of that itself. But in this particular deck, it's connected to roots and ancestry as well, which is really cool. And then the 7th direction is within, and that's not something I have ever worked with before. Yeah, and Donna's asking if the Tarot of the She is this a she companion oracle? It's definitely a separate deck, but it works beautifully with the Tarot of the She. And if you, that's fine. The artwork, of course, it's the same creator, so it is kind of familiar, but there are she-looking characters in a lot of these suits. And so the cards are on a light board, and I can't turn the light board on because then you won't be able to see it. But if you look at these faces, they should look very familiar. So look who's here. Let me leave solo layout. Oops. Exit. There we go. Sorry.
Aloha.
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 Welcome, Emily.
Hi,
Lovely
how
to
are
have
you
you
doing?
here. We are good. Welcome. Welcome to West Coast of Canada and to Hawaii.
Nice. That sounds nice. That's a vacation I'd like to take.
You're
Well,
welcome.
to the southeast coast of England, where it is actually very sunny. It's actually quite nice today.
So what time is it there?
7 p.m. Well, 7:06 p.m. because
And what time is sunset?
about an hour and a half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the clocks went forward recently, so we have
Okay.
that lovely spring, the beginning of spring thing where you keep looking out the window and going, "Oh, look at that! It's still light. Look at that." Oh.
Yeah. It's beautiful here too. I live somewhere where there are blossoms now, so it's gorgeous.
Good.
Yeah, Donna was just asking Emily if this is a companion to the She deck, and I was just commenting that a lot of the faces look very She-like, look very familiar. And is that an intention of yours?
Well, that's just me, isn't it? No, it was sort of designed to be its own thing, potentially work very well with the transparent tarot, and just by benefit of coming via my head, it sort of also resonates with the She very well. So the 3 decks work very nicely together, and because of the way that I work, I suppose they do tend to come through with these sort of otherworldly features. I think that's just a feature of my style, you know. And I've never really had a knack for a normal sort of human face. I'm not that skilled to do natural looking features. Everything's a little bit otherworldly and a bit from somewhere else. So but yeah, the energy is just, you know, it's all the energies that I work with. So they all merge together and complement each other, I think. Especially if you're somebody who resonates with one of the decks, the likelihood is that you'll get something from the others.
I like stacking myself. I like doing readings with all 3, and I stack first with the Tarot of the She and transparent tarot on top of that, and then which I got from you, Emily. So
yeah, that's basically my daily, well, my night part of my nightly devotional practice. And you can get some really interesting things come up.
I've been experimenting with 3 card readings, but each position has 3 layers. And it's really kind of gotten, I don't know, the readings are much deeper because there's more layers to see.
Good.
So Emily, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about the journey of the Transparent Oracle?
So I just got distracted by the very nearly full moon out of my window. I was like, wow. Easily distracted by beautiful things. Yeah, so I created the transparent tarot, and I was trying to get Schiffer Books to publish Tarot of the She, which I'd painted first, but hadn't been published in its entirety. So at that point, it had only been published as a limited edition Majors Only deck by an alchemist called Adam McLean up in Glasgow, who people who are interested in alchemy and are very, very deeply tarot nerds may know of him and his fabulous collections and his wonderful work.
So it was self-published first?
No, it was published by an alchemist called Adam McLean as a Majors Only limited edition deck of 100 copies.
Ah, okay.
The Tarot of the She was. So I was trying to get Tarot of the She published with Schiffer Books, because they'd just done the transparent tarot, and that had gone very well for them. And I think it was Peter Schiffer Senior who I had spoken to about this, and then he sadly passed on, and and Pete Schiffer Jr. was there with all his fresh energy running Schiffer books. And he was like, oh, yeah, but the transparent tarot is so great. Can you do another one of those? I was like, oh, really? Because, you know, transparent tarot came to me through very direct inspiration. It wasn't like a process that led to it. It just kind of came through me and was such a unique idea. I was like, well, I don't really want to repeat myself. I can't do this. I've done that. But, you know, if an idea comes to me for something else, then sure, but I don't think it's going to. And then I think it's 2 or 3 days later, I was like, well, okay, yeah, so it could be circular. That would be an interesting extra dimension to it. So with the transparencies, and then maybe you can rotate it and such a position. So maybe I could do something with the 7 directions and all of the work, you know, mixed shamanism and the ceremonial magic and astrology and underworld things. And I could bring all this together and just put my own system and my quite eclectic practice into one place, so that really it's not just a deck, it's a magical system. And then I was like, oh, I'm doing this, aren't I? So I put that to them. They liked that idea. I think I made the whole thing in 6 months, got complete creative burnout. But the idea behind it really was to create something that would give you some insight into the interconnection of all things to the way that you were interacting with the web of life as it was unfolding around you. Something that, like the transparent tarot, is fluid, but something that was a bit more metaphysical, its own original system, as opposed to your regular kind of oracle deck, where it would be much more simple than a tarot. This is in some ways more complex, but it can also be read. Once you've learned how to plug into it, you can start to read it quite intuitively, and it sort of opens portals of insight, I think. Some of the things that people have said to me after they used it, once it was out there, were very interesting in terms of how it does work for different people. But yeah, that's how it started off, with me saying, no, I couldn't possibly do that. Wait, yeah, okay.
And then 10 years later, it was reprinted.
Yeah, it was very nice to go to a second edition. I sort of realized before they contacted me to ask me what I wanted to do about that, when people, because I didn't realize, you know, whether it was popular or not. And then I started getting lots of requests for it. I've been looking at people around the world saying, oh, I've been looking everywhere for the transparent oracle. I can't find it. I'm like, what? Really? Oh, sorry. So it did sold out. And then Schiffer or Red Feather, their imprint as it is now, it gave me a choice whether to just reprint it and just put it out there again in exactly the same form, or whether I wanted to make any adjustments to it. And like any living magical system, or still very much my own personal system in a sense, taking bits and pieces from established things, I thought, well, surely in 10 years my practice has changed, and my practice now, being now an actor, as I wasn't working. I had trained as an actor, but I wasn't working as an actor at the time that I created all these decks. I mean, honestly, there's no way I would have had the time. So it's why you haven't had much new from me in terms of stuff like this for a while, because I've been very busy with my acting work. So, but that made me think, okay, well, what should I add? I should add something to do with embodiment. And so that's where the idea for an archetype for each of the 7 directions came from. So those are the extra cards that you now have in the second edition.
The 7 that are at the end of the numbers, because I noticed that you made sure that each direction had exactly 10.
Well, because I know that numerology and numbers are important to some people. It's not necessarily something that I had intentionally integrated into the deck, but I thought if somebody's used to using this deck already, and I quite like the neatness of having the 1 to 10 for each of the 7 directions, I didn't want to mess with that. So then, given the choice of adding one to the end of each direction or putting the 7 new cards at the end, I opted for the latter because that seems neater, and wasn't going to mess with anybody's ideas of what the associations with each of the numbers for the cards came from. And that would have messed with my head a bit as well, I think. So yeah.
I think people appreciate that too, because
I hope
often
so.
when second and third and fourth editions come out and everything changes, it feels like the whole deck is invalidated. And yeah, I know. I think this is really great that these were just added on to the end and not
Oh, thank you.
renumbering the whole deck. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Mhm.
And that is to do with the directions. And this is something that is also common. This is common to the Tarot of the She. It's common to the Wildwood Tarot, which is also part of John Matthews' inspiration, right? And Mark
Yeah,
Ryan.
interesting. Yeah.
And that is that the first suit is the element of air. The first suit begins in the
Yes.
east and is connected to the element of air, which
Yes.
is a different notion from Golden Dawn ideas, where we begin with the element of fire and the pattern of the tetragrammaton. So
Yeah, well, I mean, the stuff that's out there about Golden Dawn was what they wanted you to have access to. So they intentionally swapped a lot of stuff around because they didn't want non-initiates to have the actual system they were working with. So how much of that is legit or not, I don't know. But the Golden Dawn is certainly not the be-all and end-all. And for myself and John and Caitlin Matthews and Mark Ryan and various other people, the system that we've been kind of raised in, if you like, of ceremonial magic, your altar is in the east, you begin in the east, you begin with air, with spring, with the rising sun, and so forth, and all of these correspondences, and then you move round to the south. So that's basically where everything opens, where everything begins in the system that we're all familiar with. I hope that in the Transparent Oracle you can make your own choices about things like that, and just sort of adapt it accordingly and adapt your understanding accordingly. I always think with anything I create of this nature, which is essentially a tool, once it's in your hands, it's your tool, and how you use it and how you choose to interpret it is really up to you, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that's the reasoning behind the structure as it is.
Well, I really like working with the Wildwood and this Oracle together. I feel like it's such a beautiful fit. And there's a few of the animals that overlap, and the way that the seasons move through the deck, they're a perfect fit. And it's a little bit lighter in color, so it's easier to layer for me than Tarot of the She. Well, I'm a big Tarot of the She fan. It's dark, right? So it's hard to see sometimes.
Some of it is quite dark. Yes. No, quite right. Oh, lovely. I must try that. I haven't got the Wildwood out for a while. Or indeed the Greenwood, which I have in a box somewhere, precious, squirreled away. What a lovely idea.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan?
So, what was the hardest thing with this Oracle as far as figuring out? Like, the system was pretty easy for you because it's something you work with on a regular basis. So, what was the hardest thing about creating this?
All those tiny little dots, but also the geometry of it, which is much more complex than the Transparent Tarot. Intentionally so, because I think in any area of my work, it's rare that I'm not pushing something and challenging myself and trying to make progress in something. I mean, yes, I did a very jokey dog deck, which turns out to be quite nice in practice, actually, but it's a sort of a cute thing that I did. But mostly when I'm doing stuff, I'm sort of working myself experimentally to see what's going to work and how I can push things, if I've done one thing, okay, how can I take that idea and push it a bit further? And in the case of Transparent Oracle, it was adding the circular nature of that, so that it needed to work whichever way around it was. And one of these days when I do one of these, I'll dig out the tracing paper and the sketches and everything that I do still have somewhere, where you see there's various sizes of circle, and I had all of this on tracing paper. And then within the circles, there's various different stars of different points. And then there's the square and the triangle and the different sizes of triangles. So all of these sort of sacred geometry stuff that's incorporated into the deck. It's kind of hidden. Sometimes it's more obvious. In some cards, it's more obvious than others. And you can sort of see that underlying geometry, but everything revolves around these particular shapes. And it was I think the challenge was the amount of time I was given to do it, to be honest. But at the same time, if I'm not in hyperfocus, completely obsessed about something and pouring all of my energy into something, it doesn't get done. So I did get quite burned out, I think, by the end of the 6 months where I was making all that artwork and then the book. It was a lot, but like, I think much like the tarot of the Sheehan, to an extent, the Transparent tarot, although there was very focused mental process, you've also got a certain amount of channeling and trust and intuition going into that as well. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's incredibly. I don't know whether I could do it now, but I look at it. I don't know about you. I look at everything I've done, no matter how recent or how long ago, and I go, how did I do that? I don't know. It just sort of comes through. So yeah, it was very rewarding and delightful to create artwork that was a bit more complex than the Transparent tarot as well. We pushed it a bit further, like more color, more, it's prettier. Because I thought with the Transparent tarot it would have to be as I did, very, very minimalist. And then in practice looked at it and thought, well, actually, I can allow myself a bit more color and a bit more freedom and a bit more beauty here too. So just wonderfully rewarding, but I was incredibly burnt out by the end of writing the book, which is why you have spreads in that, which I never use. I don't know whether anybody uses them, but they wanted spreads, so there are spreads in there written by David Rankin, out of pity, seeing me sobbing on a Skype call once. Did that for me to finish the book.
Actually, did try one of those spreads in the back.
Oh yeah,
the chakra spread. I did that.
How was that?
Last week, and it was really good actually, because the way you do it, you lay out the 7, and the top 3 get smushed together, and the bottom 3 get smushed together. So the heart chakra is that connector between the 2 groups, and it really showed where the person was, both mentally and physically. And interesting enough, the earth symbol was the heart chakra. So it was like being in nature and like connecting with earth is how this person connects their 2 halves, basically. Which was very on point for the person as well. So, I don't know. I haven't played with all the spreads, but I started playing with a couple.
I've found it unusual that people use this deck for other people to do readings. Often when I speak to people who use this deck, they're like, yeah, but this is my deck for me. And I use for me and my personal things. I don't. I do. I think I've taken to using it in a particular way when I'm reading for other people. I tend to finish a reading with it. So I'll use the tarot, and perhaps I'll use the she and the Transparent together, or whichever one seems to resonate with the person I'm reading for. And then at the end, I choose 3 cards from the oracle and layer them to give them a sort of a positive focus to go and make the change that they want to make. So I'm very interested in turning a reading into a more positive, active process than a passive, receptive process for whoever I'm reading for, whether it's in person or or online, to give them something so they feel like, quite rightly, that they have choice and will, and they can put their intent into the world, that nothing is fixed. And even, if the reading's fantastic and it looks like everything's going to be great, it's like, okay, let's stay on focus. Here you go. And here's what's supporting you. Here are the energies connected to you and supporting you in your intent right now. So I find it very, very handy for that. Slightly off on a tangent, but but I don't tend to use the spreads, but there they are. There was a lot that was very challenging about creating it, but I'm glad that I did. I think I'm just about recovered 10 years later.
That's good.
Did you add anything to the second edition book?
Well, let's see. So obviously there's the accompanying text for each of the archetypes, and I think something about why they're there. And I believe that I put in a bit about how you might use it with other decks, but I don't know, maybe that was the tarot. I can't remember. Do you have any idea how many things I've done since then? I literally like jumping from project to project to project to project, and I don't often look at my own book, so I couldn't really tell you. I think you probably have a better idea than I have. Not a great deal. I do remember when I was writing the book originally for the Oracle. Sorry, I'm surrounded by clutter here. My feet wrapped in a wire. When I was writing the book originally, I was like, well, okay, so this is a deck about the whole universe and your place in it. How do I write a book to go with that? So I can only really give you a starting point, and then you make your own notes and you build it yourself, really. It gives you an idea of how this works and what it's about and what it might mean, but then you've got to come up with your own personal associations. It's one that I really recommend people make your own notebook for and just add to it as you go, or just however you work best. Internalize that understanding, perhaps. But it was either that relatively small book or a frickin' set of encyclopedias, and I did not have time for that. So nobody wants to buy a huge box and here's the deck, and here's the accompanying book. Excuse me a moment. So yeah, no, I didn't add a lot. I added little bits, but I don't think there's enough in the world to write the absolutely thorough accompanying book.
Right. Yeah.
Y'all got to write your own versions of that. I'm sorry.
I had a question. What was my question? Oh my goodness. What is my question? Oh yes, Emily. Let's do Gerald's question first. I'm going to write mine down. Gerald's question's on the screen.
Yes. How is it teaching classes around your decks? Have you gotten any unexpected perspectives of the decks you've created?
Oh gosh, constantly. Ever since the Transparent Tarot first came out, and then followed a few years later by the Oracle, and I'm constantly learning from other people, and I'm always very, very grateful for the work that other readers and the explorations that other people have done with them. Casting my mind way back, there's been people who've gone, and look, I do this, and I was like, great, run with it. I mean, the deck itself continues to surprise me all this time later, but because every mind walking around this world is experiencing the world in its own unique way, through whatever our gathering of perceptions and understandings has been to that point. So every set of eyes, every heart, every mind that uses these decks is experiencing them in a way that is different from me. So they're going to have different ideas and perceptions and things. And it's all fascinating, and I love that. I can't think of any specific examples. I'm wondering actually whether the whole film strip thing with the Transparent Tarot was originally very early on somebody else taking it and going, oh, look at this, it looks like a film strip, it looks like a storyboard type thing. there was definitely some really nice ideas, and there's things that other people do with the transparent oracle that I wouldn't do that works for them. That's great. The whole system built into it that you should be able to rotate it, that's absolutely intentional and meant to be there. But it makes me kind of, because I designed it with the sacred geometry and in particular to be symmetrical and beautiful in a particular way and sort of work, and that works with my brain. When I see it not lined up like the way that it was created and it's a slightly at a funny angle or something, like some people might just put it down just however it comes out, it makes me a little bit twitchy. But I'm absolutely fine with other people doing that, so long as they don't show me. It's fine. But people will get their own understandings and their own insights from that, and it's actually a really nice organic fluid way of doing it. Other people have put down 3 cards and started just to see things that aren't even there. They've just instantly started scrying with it because it's created some kind of gateway into their subconscious. So they're like, great. I mean, a lot of the uses that I'll suggest to people now have come from things that people have said to me when they've been using them and this has happened for them. And I'm like, maybe you could try this, you know?
The scrying has been amazing. That is my favorite thing.
Good.
Oh, it's really, really powerful. My question was about the direction of within. Can you speak to the direction within? Because that's not something that is that I was familiar with.
Yes, again, the system of the 7 directions that I've been working with for a very long time. And in essence, that is the axis of the whole deck, is the direction of within, because it really is about how the self, how yourself, you're connecting to the universe and what your place in the web of everything is. And then I was like, as a concept, that's great. So you're like, okay, so we've got 7 directions, north, south, east, west, we understand what that is. But above, I understand what that is. Yeah, that's the planets, and that's maybe some angelic stuff or deities and things. Great. Because the underworld, well, we know what that is. That's the ancestors and maybe the Grail Hallows and Styx and Arthurian stuff in there, and the She. It's great. Okay, so the direction of within, yeah, we know what that. Oh, because we know what that is, right? Crap. It's like, how do I do this? Because it's like, okay, so I want to do the direction of within has to be about the self, and every self, as I was just saying, is so unique. So how do we relate to the world? Well, we relate through our senses and through sensing, through empathy, through whatever it is we're receiving here. But then we're also giving things out. So we're giving our voice. How do you put that in an image? The sensation of that, the sense of that. How do you convey something so intangible and ephemeral? So I went with these sort of energetic lines and patterns that radiate out or come in, or to try and convey something about what that is.
This is an amazing card.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, vision, right? Which can be talking about physical vision or otherworldly vision. It can mean any number of things in different contexts. And again, you can see the geometry that's happening there as well. So it almost looks like by the act of receiving light, we are also emanating it in a sense. And that's what it is, that interflow of energies of within and without, and the microcosm and the macrocosm reflected in that. And that really is the hub of what this deck is about. So you'll see that that was the decision that I made there on, okay, so it's all going to, the gateway of self is just the blank face and the hands, because the face and the hands are the ways in which we are pretty much identified in the world, the face being the gateway to ourselves, the eyes being the gateway to the soul, but also the lines on our hands being an identifying marker too. And then you'll see that repeated not only in the direction of within, but also in the masks that are sometimes presented as the guides and so forth, so they become a part of us and work through us or with us or so forth. If that makes
No,
impact.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the number 7 is so very powerful and significant. And I find it odd that in the shamanic training that I did, that there wasn't 7 directions. There was always 6 directions. So,
I find that odd. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I hope that this has sort of helped to give you an extra piece, if you like, of that puzzle. How strange that, yeah, but there's so many different systems. I'm sure that your teachers had their reasons for having the system that they have, and that whatever it is that they've been trained in and raised in and so forth. But for me, this is what makes sense. And also having mostly the triple structure, so the 7 and 3 for me are two of the most significant and powerful numbers. And then just delighted when I had the chance to go back and put in an extra card for each direction. So I'm like, and now I can have 11 cards in each direction. Why didn't I do that before? But it was obviously meant to be the way that it was, because it might not necessarily have occurred to me. Well, it didn't to put in archetypes before, when I wasn't necessarily working in that way. So that's how things have unfolded. But I hope that has been interesting and enlightening to you, to bring in an extra direction and start to work with it that way.
And the animals for each direction, how were they chosen?
So for me, with anything, and I'm aware of the problematic nature of calling it shamanic, but really by that I mean, because most of our native practices here in this land were pretty much stamped out and were passed on orally, and then it sort of died out because there wasn't much left written. So it's all been sort of revised and so forth. But we do know that we had practices in traditional witchcraft and native practices of this land and in Druidry and so forth that were similar in essence to shamanic practices, where you would journey in another worldly sense, work with animal spirits and so forth. So for me, when you're working with anything that is land-based spirituality, you should be working with the land that you are on. And because this is my own personal system that I couldn't put the whole world in it. I'm like, well, just put my world. I mean, it was difficult to choose because there's just such a vast array of choice. But I was like, I'm going to work with animals that are or were significant in the culture that I am in and the land that I am in. So I've started off there, then looked at mythologies of the various and sort of symbolic significance, and tried to find a good balance in there that would give you, even if they're not necessarily animals or birds or whatever that you would necessarily have had as much contact with, that everything was covered in terms of what you would need from a tool like this. And that was a decision-making process for sure.
Okay. Can you address Kimmy's question?
Never considered pairing it. Could you explain how you do this? Put one of them on top of the other one? I'm not sure what you mean. Never considered pairing it. What do you mean, Kimmy? I have
Are you talking about the two transparent decks together?
Does she mean? I don't know what their pronouns are. Do they mean that they have both decks, the transparent and the oracle, or the she? Be open to whatever you see in front of you. So if you're talking about using the transparent tarot and the oracle together, like you're being shown here, with all of this, it doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need me to tell you how. Find your way of doing it. Look at what's in front of you. Always start with any tarot, with any oracle, this or anything else. If you've picked it because you resonate with it, then trust that and sit down and just put the book to one side to begin with. look at what is in front of you and tell a story. Start with that. I mean, to start with just listing the basic details that you see in front of you, and then you'll be surprised at how much information you get. And then what feelings does that image give you? What starts to happen in your body? What starts to happen in your mind? Does it tell a story? Does it start to move? However you work, just let that process happen and trust that process and observe that process, and then let things come through. Don't get caught up in, well, how do I do this? What's the correct way? There's no correct way. Find your way. But literally, this is a lovely way of doing it. I always like to use 3 cards, but that's just me because I like the number 3. And so if I'm using the oracle with the tarot together, I might do 2 like this, but I'll generally, depending on whether it's a specific sort of answer that I want in terms of things that are happening in the external world, or whether it's more about an internal process, that weight may fall on the tarot. For more external things in terms of what's happening out there, and for internal things and connections, I may have 2 cards from the oracle and 1 from the tarot if my emphasis is on connections and internal processes. But that's going to vary depending what works for you. If you have some like more specific question about that, please feel free to pop it in here, because I want to be able to answer you, but really don't worry about there being right ways or wrong ways. Just find, play, find your way, experiment. There is no set way.
Speaking of combining, just yesterday I did a reading for somebody where I did 3 positions, but then I started with the Tarot of the Chi, and I put transparent tarot on top of that, and transparent oracle to finish. This is like a last.
Yeah, that's the order that I do too. Yeah, right. I mean, it wouldn't work if the She went on top, of course, but yeah, I always go She, transparent tarot, then oracle. Yeah,
right. And it was a great reading because it was 3 positions, and each position had 3 layers, and the layers really spoke to each other in a way where I felt like it gave the full story instead of just part of the story.
Good.
Yeah, it was a nice deep reading, and at first I was like, well, okay, is this the past, present, future spread, or what are we doing? He's like, oh, I don't want to like put specifics. Let's just see what each pile says and how they connect together. It was a total story. It exactly explained where he is in the moment, and helped him realize he's where he needs to be, and the steps he's taking are the right steps.
Good. That's great. That's great to hear. And I'm like immensely grateful for grateful to Red Feather, to Shift Books for, I don't know whether it's coincidental, whether it's the people who print it or whatever it is, that the cards, the transparent tarot and the tarot of the sheet is like the right size to work really nicely together. And then the oracle, which I understand is massive, and I'm sorry if anybody has small hands, but just fits so nicely over the top, and somehow the geometry of all those decks, which were independently developed, kind of click together. And 10 or more than 10 years for some of them. It's horrifying. Later, I'm still surprised by some of the things that come up, and I'm delighted.
Emily, I put this card on the table because I want to ask you about your relationship with the Fae, with the elementals.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work with them, visit them? Can you describe your relationship with the elementals in your life presently or in the past?
First of all, I'm going to make a distinction here between fairy beings, nature spirits, and elementals, which are all connected but not the same thing. The She possibly something slightly else as well. I mean, within oh gosh, I could talk for all night about that as well, so let's not. Right, okay, carding, be concise. Yes, too concise. Since childhood, I worked with fairy beings. I used to, not having been obviously taught anything or trained at that point, I remember as a child, an older child. I can't remember exactly how old, but having a dream or having a series of dreams where a door in a hill would appear in my garden, and I would walk through this door, which was illuminated from within, and go down into a hill and meet all these mythical beings, and I would go and do missions for them in my dreams. And it wasn't until much later, when I started to read about things like this, that then made sense. Because when you're a kid, you're not, well, I suppose it depends on who your parents are. My parents were not these people. That was not the idea of fairy that I had encountered at that point, but it was there in my dreams. So that is a lifelong connection. And although I'm now in a town, and unfortunately, well, I mean, it's all part of the path unfolding, isn't it? I was in very rural. So when I made Tarot of the She, I was actually not far from here. I was about 10 miles inland from here, very rural surroundings. There were particular power places in nature, not that would have been remarkable to an outside eye or anything, just my own places that I found within walking distance of my house that I would work with and plug in. And then I was in Cornwall, and I was in the wilds of Dartmoor and Devon. I was in these wild places where I could find my places to plug in and work with the beings of the land where I was. That part of my practice is no less important to me. It's become trickier and less. It's no less fundamental. But now I'm in a town, I can't be out and I don't really have a space that I can. There's sort of there's been a shift of emphasis, but there's no less of a profound and important life path connection. It's just that currently there's less, because I'm so busy with acting work and travel, and I'm less rooted. That's what it is. I was very uprooted when I got divorced in 2014, and that's also when my acting career took off. So I had to leave Cornwall. It was a couple of years in Devon, which was wonderful, but this is quite lengthy. I'm sorry, it's difficult to explain. I was in Dartmoor, which is a very wild and very powerful place, for 2 years. And I could, if I'd stayed, it would have been the world's most impractical place to be in terms of an acting career and also my child. Because they were struggling in the educational system. The school that I had moved there in order to put them into had turned around and turned them down. Then they got booted out of the state school, and then they were out of school and alone and isolated in the middle of nowhere for a good year, which was not good for their mental health. It wasn't great for mine. And I had to move away from the countryside. And so I think that possibly there's been less emphasis on that particular side of my practice, but it's a fundamental part of me, and always will be. And so in my work with the goddess Hecate, which is probably one of the main focuses of my magical practice now, because I can do that inside my flat. I wouldn't advise doing too much fairy work inside your houses, kids. My particular role in terms of her service is connected to the fairy realm and to the guardians of the inner realm and so forth. That's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, that's very important to me and always has been my whole life. I think it's a big part of why I'm here. And the Tarot of the She was always intended to be more than a tarot. It was always intended as very much a spiritual mission on my part, very much a gateway. And that is why when I came to make the Transparent Oracle, I was trying to get the Tarot of the She published. It wasn't because I'm like, I made a thing and I want it published. It was like, this is the thing that I have been told to give to you to get out in the world and make it accessible to as many people as possible, because it's part of my magical and spiritual mission in this world to strengthen the connection between the worlds. If that doesn't sound like a pretentious thing to say.
What came first, the chicken or the egg? The She or the workshop with John Matthews? I guess I'm asking, were you connecting with the she before you had the workshop with John Matthews that inspired the
Great.
deck?
So yes, I was, but not necessarily by that name. So there's a sort of intrinsic deep spiritual connection that's always been there. And what unlocked that in terms of my work was the glyph of the she that John Matthews discovered, which set me instantly on the journey work that I did in that initial workshop with John told me to incorporate the glyph into my artwork, which acted as a gateway and so forth, and really set me along that path. That was the first thing that I had created of that kind, because my sort of overarching journey, because let's not forget that it's not an insignificant thing that I had a child. So I trained as an actor in the 90s, spent a few years doing bits and bobs of really not much. I did Cambridge Shakespeare Festival and a couple of nice things, but I hadn't really done much. Bits and bobs of this, day job, bits and bobs. Never planned to have a child, really. And then that unplanned happened. And then I left acting or trying to do all of that. And then I also left my first husband very shortly after. My little one was very little at that time. They're 20 now. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. And the very short version of that is at that point that I ran away with somebody who was also into magical things and so forth, and was connected to John Matthews and all of this. John's books I'd been reading for years and years and years and years and years. From very early. Oh, I'm rambling now. But I've been reading John's work since I was like a teenager. So I was always aware of his work, but I didn't know him personally at that point. And then it was through that second marriage and relationship that I connected with John and started working with him, and actually started to actually get to practice some of the things that I've been reading about for so long. And strangely, the time that I then found myself with, because I was a parent and because I was gave up that side of my career for a while to bring my child up, meant that I had the ability to then start to channel my spiritual side into creating things that other people could use as tools. So those two things kind of aligned through timing and the fact that I was at home and in the countryside, and it all sort of, but it was always meant, it always felt like that was something that was meant to happen, and that connection felt like coming home from the dreams that I used to have when I was a child to the decisions that I made as a teenager about, yes, I'm going to be a druid and I'm going to do this, this and this and this. And then whatever that weird journey was and whatever that was all about, it all led me to the various places I was meant to be, and for all the unplanned, consciously, things that happened that was so life-shifting, having a child, 2 divorces, various places that I've lived, it's all been part of that. And through all of that, whatever the beings are that called themselves the she, how connected they are to the she of Irish folklore, really, I think that's something that still warrants a lot of exploration. But yeah, they've always been there in different forms, and there's other connections there. But
Beth, I hope your question has been well answered.
I hope I accidentally hit upon something useful in all of that rambling.
Mm-hmm. And Gerald has asked if you have thought about another deck.
Other people have done that. But Hecate was really very strongly involved in the inspiration of the transparent oracle, and you can see that sort of through it, the triplicity of it, the triple formed images. Hecate herself really makes an appearance, I think, in the Ancestor/Dark Goddess card. But for me, because the aspect of Hecate that I work with primarily is as Sotera, or the Anima Mundi, the descent of soul into the world and the animating of the world, and really that is so much what the Transparent Oracle is about. So in a sense, Transparent Oracle is my unofficial Hecate deck, But no, I do not have plans for a Hecate-focused deck. I do have, within very convenient reach, because it's on my shrine just here, a Dice Oracle, which I developed with Sarita Deeste as part of the Torchlit Path course that we did. And at some point, when I have the time, this will be made available in a limited edition of hand-painted and blessed stuff with a nice little accompanying book. So in terms of Hecate divination, this is in the works, but I'm so busy. I'm lucky. There's not a lot of actors at my level that have the problem of having too much work at the moment. It's a bit mad. But yeah, so that's sort of a thing that exists and will eventually make it out into the world to be available. And I have some notes that I've made on another deck with a different theme of something that some people who know me might be able to guess. That's also something that's a big part of my life. Whether I ever have the time to do that or not, I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see.
So just to return to the Turley sheet, I remember when I took the workshop with you that you said that each piece of art was created in one sitting each, like so 78 sittings basically.
Most of them. Mostly that was the way that that deck came out. So basically, it was a year and a day. Very, very fairy contract. Year and a day. I wasn't allowed to drink during that whole time either. And I would sit down with pen, so there were no prior sketches or anything like that, and it would just get drawn straight out in pen. And the process of creating each of those cards would kind of reflect the energy of that card itself. So some of the earth cards, for example, took a bit longer and really needed a bit more craft and patience, whereas maybe some of the fire cards would go blah, and it would just come out. Some of them would shift as I was drawing them. Some of them would come through very much as I initially visualized it. And I had to kind of trust that process. And then I would paint in watercolors to try and keep as much of the fluidity of the original vision as possible. So yeah, so most of them were in one sitting. There was a couple that I think the longest was maybe over 3 days if something was really taking a while and really wanted to be very particular, and that was just the energy of that card. But yeah, I think the idea was to get that vision down and that energy in as swiftly and as fluidly as possible with each of those, and I hope that comes through.
Definitely.
Is the next deck to do in conjunction with So Potent Art and bringing the Shakespearean concepts into the tarot?
That's what I'd like to do. Not tarot necessarily, because again, that's been done to death. There's a load of Shakespeare tarots out there now. I believe there's another really nice looking one that's in the works. I'm not interested in repeating things that other people have done, but I would like to make a deck of Shakespeare wisdom cards, which is complementary to So Potent Art. So takes a lot of the stuff from there and the understanding in there and puts that in an oracle deck form. So that's what I've got some notes that I've made on that, and I've been thinking about it for years. It's actually made it to note form now, so perhaps it will happen. I have the urge to do some art and some drawing, but I just, who knows? I'll probably get into hyperfocus and create it in an afternoon one day, but who can even tell? I hope that I get around to producing that at some point. But other things keep having to take priority, I'm afraid. But those are the potential plans.
Do you have any other workshops coming up for people interested in working?
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't. But I do have an online performance coming up, which does have a lot of very magical ideas in it. On April the 23rd for Shakespeare's birthday, and also the 400th anniversary of the publishing of the first folio. I have an online show created and written specifically for Zoom called Brave New World, and it's about one man's journey through death into the weighing of his heart in the other world, and it uses a mixture of stuff that myself and my fellow actor Miguel Perez, who is in LA, we've been working together online. We're dear friends. I've never met him in person. We connected over lockdown through doing Shakespeare online with The Show Must Go Online, which is available on YouTube for free for anybody who wants to watch any of those shows. And we were in a production of Hamlet online together, and he said, I want to work with you. And so we've been just very steadily piecing together. We started off bits, two-hander scenes from Shakespeare that we wanted to do with to begin with, we had quite a silly sort of concept, just a meta concept for tying it all together. And then it slowly became this incredibly spiritual thing about journeying through the underworld in a sense, and facing different aspects of ourselves, and sort of weighing up our relationships and guilt and things that we need to process before we could move on to a more balanced state of spirit through and so that's happening. That's if people want to come on, there's very limited space. It is just on Zoom. Oh gosh, well done. Everybody in the chat is so on it. They're like, here's a link to that, here's a link to this. Thanks so much, Peter. It's great, well done. So there's limited space, but it'd be lovely to see some of you there. We will do a Q&A afterwards as well. So if you do come to that, just keep your cameras and mics off as you come in, because it is just a Zoom meeting that we're just doing a play in. And then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. I'm just about still around for it. I was like, I've got all these things going on. I hope none of it interferes with this. But yeah, it's hopefully that's still happening. But no workshops at the moment because I'm really busy. I'm in London tomorrow rehearsing for a play called Shadowless, which is based on so a woman in Devon has adapted one of the books by one of the women involved in the Castaneda movement. And so it's based on that work. It's quite shamanic. It's a little bit culty, but it's good. So it's a fascinating play. So we start work on that tomorrow in London. We're going to have like maybe 2 days rehearsal before we're on. It's insane. Then I fly to Serbia basically in the middle of the night tomorrow night to work on a feature film that I can't tell you what it is because I just signed an NDA, but it's very exciting. The door's just gone. 1 second. Can you get that, please? Thanks. So I'm in Serbia for a week.
You're busy.
And then I come back and do Brave New World, which is cool. Then, I've got Shadowless. I'm doing my own solo show, Quintessence, in the mornings while I'm in Devon doing Shadowless. I have Quintessence in the mornings, Shadowless in the evenings. More Richard III shows coming up for anybody in the UK who might watch this. I'm also taking it to South Korea in the autumn, if anybody in South Korea is watching. Then I'm at Edinburgh Fringe with a show that hasn't been announced yet, so I probably can't tell you what that is yet. But so basically, I don't have time to run any workshops at the moment. I'm sorry. If you're interested in that, I don't have a mailing list at the moment because I can't work it out. But if you follow me on Eventbrite, I'll probably stick with that because that's what I know and it's easier, and admin is not my friend. So just follow me on Eventbrite and it will come up whenever I put, how do you keep it all straight? Nothing's straight in my world, Peter. Nonsense.
And also, if you're on Facebook, there's groups you can join, the Transparent Tarot group and the Transparent Oracle group. And Emily
groups. Oh gosh, I mean, exactly. Follow me on social media and you'll be the first to know about anything that happens in my life because I spend too much time on it. I don't know how I ever get anything done, and I'm doing all these things. I don't really know how it all works, but somehow it does. So keep in touch. And somebody's just, I do need to go now. Somebody's just asked, how do I feel about Upstart Crow? I love it. It's like there's a comedy written just for me. It's like Blackadder, but Shakespeare. I didn't like it at first. I didn't like the first couple of episodes, and then I stuck with it, and I was like, actually, they made a comedy just for me. Very happy. I love it. Are there any other outstanding questions that I can quickly get to?
So thank you so much for
I
joining
get back
us.
to learning lines and questioning all of my life choices. No, I'm having a lovely time. It's a bit manic, but it's great, and I'm very lucky, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much for joining us. And
It was an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's wonderful to share all this with you. And it's just a joy to see that how you're using the work that I put out into the world. So thank you.
Thank you for creating this amazing work too.
Off you go. Off you go.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank everyone for being here.
Yeah. I just wanted to address the book that I mentioned earlier on.
Oh, yes.
So when Emily was telling her story about as a child in contact with other folk, she was differentiating between the types of elementals. As a child, I read a story called The Secret World of Og, which was written by a very well-known Canadian author, Pierre Berton. And in this story, the children go underground beneath their playroom floor. So they're playing in their playhouse, and there's a saw that comes up through the floor and cuts a hole in their playground floor. And so the children have the secret access into this other world. And it is so real and it is so beautiful that this somewhat, you would think, stoic sort of character is writing about this magical world. But it just reminded me of her story and just how it's all right there. And yeah, it's kind of beautiful.
If we just could pierce the veil, right?
Yeah. If we could. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. I hope your questions got answered. And if not, we can always get together with Emily again in her very busy schedule. Maybe not.
In her very busy schedule. Maybe in 6 months or something.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting this, Sadhana.
Oh, my pleasure. And a little bit of chaos. We're kind of broadcasting in lots of different directions. And so if your comment didn't get highlighted, I do apologize. It's the first time I have done this really big multi-broadcasting thing. So thank you all again.
First time for me as well. So I think it worked pretty well.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Aloha.